So thank Professor Harzing for sharing experience with your excellent, impactful research and also other academic work. So me as a representative for junior researcher, what would you advise us based on your experience with publishing early in our career, in your career, I mean?
Mm-hmm. That's a very, very good question, and very important for junior academics. I think there's quite a lot of things that really struck me when I thought about my early articles. And the first one really is, if you look at the 95 expatriate failure rates article, I would say don't be afraid as a PhD student to call out things that you think aren't right. You need to make sure that you've done your work rigorously and that you're sure you've read all the relevant literature. But if you really feel that what has been done in the past wasn't right, then don't be afraid to write it up. I actually asked my supervisor, and he said, sure, go ahead. That's how science progresses. If people go back to earlier work and say, no, I think we should do it better. And if you are a PhD student and you found a topic where you think this is really something that should be done better, but you're worried, you're welcome to get in touch with me. And I'm happy to help you writing it up in a way that doesn't offend senior scholars, a bit like Nancy Adler helped me write my failure rates, sorry, not the failure rate article, but the follow-up article on academic referencing. So don't be afraid. And then also I would say as a PhD student, you're often advised to aim high and go for the top journals. That's fair enough, because publishing the top journal is kind of a business card, but don't discard the option of publishing in lower ranked journals. International Journal of HRM is quite a well-respected journal now, but in 95 it's only just started and it wasn't seen as a top journal. And Career Development International, which is a journal in which I published a second article on expatriate failure rate and how to improve the concept, still not a highly ranked journal. But these two journals really allowed me to write a story that I wanted to write. And that's important too, because sometimes you just have something that you think is important. So you look for the journal that will publish that rather than go for the top journal. And then the other thing, I guess, also realize that you always have a second chance to revisit a topic. When you're starting out in your career, you think that whatever you do needs to be right the first time. But you have a long academic career. You might be working in academia for 30 years, 40 years, even 50 years. So if you feel you didn't get it quite right the first time when you published an article, but you're still interested in the topic, then feel free to write about it again, just like I did with the failure rate article, and then generalize the message of the article and write about academic referencing. So you can certainly do that. And then the other thing, and that was based on the article I did with Klaus Christensen on the concept of expatriate failure. Collaborators and co-authors can come from the most unexpected corners. So be willing to work with anyone who has good ideas. They don't have to be professors. They can be students too. So don't look at their academic rank or the university they work for or their nationality or their ethnicity, their gender, their age. Just work with anyone who has good ideas and who gives you energy in discussing these ideas. I wouldn't necessarily recommend with people you've never met, but it can work. The article I did with Klaus Christensen, I've never met Klaus. I don't even know what he looks like. We only ever exchange emails. From his name, I think he's male, but I'm not even certain about that. And then the last one, and I'm not the first one to say this to junior academics, but it is important, and that's be persistent. I've written a white paper about the 4 P's of publishing, And the fourth P is persistence. But persistence is really the most important thing in academia. And every academic, even the most senior and most accomplished academic, gets rejections all the time. So there is an outlet for every article you write. You just need to find it, and never ever give up on your work. So persist, persist, persist.
Great messages, not only for early career or junior scholars, but for all of us. So kind of a follow-up question to that. Again, you know, junior scholars, early career scholars, we all want our research to be impactful, right? And the two papers that made it to our list have more than 1,200 citations combined, phenomenal number, obviously. So what do you think made these papers so impactful? And are there any kind of generalizations we can make based on that for what makes a paper impactful?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one thing that both these articles have in common is that they might have appealed to several distinct audiences. So not just the expatriates or global mobility literature, but the 95 article on the myth of high expatriate failure rates, that was about academic referencing as much as expatriate failure. So it was also cited by academics who work in the sociology of science or in bibliometrics, and they focused on what drives referencing behaviors rather than expatriate failure. And the Journal of World Business article of Bears, Bumblebees and Spiders, that was about the role of expatriates in controlling foreign subsidiaries. But that meant that it wasn't just of interest to the expatriate management field, but also those who are working in headquarter subsidiary relationships, because expatriates were a way to control foreign subsidiaries, the relationship between headquarters and subsidiaries. So they're in both, in at least two fields. And I think that helps, because then you have twice the number of academics reading the paper and possibly citing the paper. And then, of course, it also helps if you have a novel message, because, of course, novelty is very citable. And that failure rate article was of course quite novel, because nobody had done that before. And I did feel a bit like the little boy in Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, and pointing out that the emperor really didn't have any clothes on, whereas everyone else were happy to pretend that he did. And I think actually those kind of articles are best to write early in your career, because you're still a bit naive. You hear all these things about academics needing to be rigorous, and then you see they're not, and you kind of really surprised. And you're not quite socialized in all the academic traditions yet. So you might see things that other people don't see. So don't think you necessarily need experience for all of that. Sometimes you just need a fresh pair of eyes. And I think the second one, the Journal of World Business article, was less novel in that sense, but it still was, I think, the first or one of the first that really study how expatriates control foreign subsidiaries. So the general advice I would have for PhD students is really focus on things that are new, explore new domains, and don't just do kind of Me Too studies and just add a tiny little variable. You can do that kind of one or two articles, but don't keep doing that all the time. And then the last one, and that really struck me when I looked at these two articles again and looked at the titles. Having a memorable title really helps too. People won't necessarily cite an article because of the title, but they might pick it up easier because of the title. And in order to cite an article, you first need to read it. So you first need to notice it. And Persistent Myth of Expatriate Failure obviously is quite provocative. The follow-up article to that are referencing errors undermining our scholarship and credibility is probably even more provocative. So that really grabs people's attention. And then the Journal of World Business article that was called Of Bears, Bumblebees and Spiders. People think, what is this about? I'm going to read the abstracts to find out, and then maybe they read the rest of the paper. So I think these three areas, and I'm sure there are lots of other reasons why my papers get cited, but these three struck me for these three papers. But most of all, and I think this is really important for junior academics to realize, citations really do take a long time to take off. I had almost no citations in the first 5 years after publishing my work. And in the social sciences, it's not like in the life sciences and the natural sciences where you get really rapid citations within 1 or 2 years of publishing. No, in the social sciences, citations are really spread out, sometimes over 20 years. These two articles are still cited. So don't expect to be cited within a couple of years. And when you go up for tenure, after maybe 5 or 6 years, you might not have many citations yet. And I think that's really important to realize.
Thank you, Professor Harzing. It's for experience and advice to do impactful research. And we as a junior researcher, when we are learning how to do properly research, and especially how to make impact later on. So what is your advice for a junior scholar to do impactful research?
Mm-hmm. I think it's really nice you asked that, because that's a really good point of departure. Do impactful research rather than asking, how do I get published? Because that's only the first step. And the publication of an article is the start. It's not the finish of the research project. So what I would say is impactful research, first of all, follow your heart. Focus on topics that you're passionate about and where you have unique skills. Because a lot of the research that I see and review for journals these days is really what I call cookie cutter research. It's methodologically very skilled, very well done, but it's really boring. So don't just do what everyone else does. Dare to be different, dare to be critical. And I think these two articles that we talked about earlier were different. And I think that's part of why they were impactful. But also, I think we need to, as academics, realize that when we talk about impact, we usually talk about citations. But that's just impact on other academics. And that's not all that our research does. We have a tremendous impact on our students as well. And in any good university, research will feed into the classroom, and students will benefit from research-led teaching. So our articles might have an impact in the classroom as well. So we have kind of two major functions of a university, research and teaching, and we can have impacts in both areas. But there's also a third function of a university, and that's not something that junior academics often realize, and that's external engagement. And that's very much our impact on practice, on public policy, or on society more generally. So when you talk about impact, there are really at least 5 different types of impact. But I think as young academics, we mostly focus on citations. So let me say a few things on citations to finish off this discussion. And I think there's a lot of things you can do as a junior academic to improve the chances of your work being cited. And I'm talking about ethical things. I'm not talking about unethical things like forcing people to cite your work. And I mentioned earlier that I came up with 4 P's for publication. I also have 4 C's for citation, getting cited. And the first one is competence. Your work needs to be good. You need to produce high quality work. If your work isn't high quality, it's unlikely to be cited. There are a few exceptions. Sometimes shoddy work gets cited. Most of the times it's quality work. But then second, collaboration. because co-authors can really improve the quality of your paper if they have complementary skills. And they also read your paper again and again. So you have more chance to polish the paper. And also working with co-authors gives you more motivation to finish your papers. But in terms of citations, they have their own network as well. So they have other people they know who are going to read the paper and are going to cite the paper. So collaboration is good for the quality of the paper, but it's also good for citations. And then I would say the third C is for care. Care for your academic reputation. Never ever engage in unethical or questionable research practices, but also care for other academics. And that's something I really feel strongly about, because if you build high quality networks with other academics that are based on trust and reciprocity, not instrumentally, these people are useful to me. No, they're based on trust and reciprocity. That really helps you to disseminate your research. And if you disseminate your research, you'll get more citations. But most of all, obviously, is communication, because that might sound like blindingly obvious, but people can only cite your paper if they know about it. So you need to make sure that your paper reaches the widest possible audience. And you can do that face-to-face by presenting it at universities or at conferences, but you can also do that through social media. And that is, in fact, a little bit what we're doing right now with this interview, and what you are doing with WAVE, with launching the top 20 articles in various fields to celebrate WAVE's 20th anniversary, because you use modern technology and social media to communicate about our research. So I think that's something that we all need to do much more of. So I would like to really thank you, Saba and Ha, and also Stacey and Tanvi, who did an interview before, and Naomi as well, for all your hard work in sharing our collective research, because I think it's really, really important.
Thank you so much, Anne-Wil, for this very inspiring talk. We really learned a lot from your experience, from your insight, from your wisdom. Congrats again, and thanks for doing this with us on behalf of all WAVE membership. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.